Ollie, they say a week is a long time in politics, but it's been 2 weeks for us, and now we're back into it. We might touch on politics at the end. You're looking sharp. I love this baseball cap.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Is it B for baseball?
No, it's B for something else. I'll tell you about it later.
Yeah, no, beautiful logo there. I thought, why don't we jump in and at the beginning, just let's get your observations on the New Zealand housing stock. So if we go right back, it was pretty rough living, and then we sort of, we start thinking villas, bungalows, maybe state homes, and then we jump into that, what was happening in the 80s, and then we come up to the mid-centuries and what we've got now. So what's your observations? What have you played with? What have you enjoyed through that stock?
Well, talking about villas, going right back to the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, I renovated lots of villas.
Oh, okay.
It was a lot of fun because they were well built, most of them.
Yep.
Cowrie and that sort of thing. But the biggest pain with these old villas were the tiny kitchens.
Okay.
And also the walls were covered not on wallboard but in scrim, which was a sacking and a type of sacking.
And that was over
rough boards,
planks, wasn't it? Yeah.
And so you had to tighten the scrim up. There was a whole story. I could tell you how to tighten the scrim up and wallpaper over it, which is something I became expert in. Yeah. But they were good old houses, and they're looked after today, and they're in demand, and they didn't leak.
Interesting, isn't it? Because you open one of those up, and the sawdust between the walls is still dry, isn't it?
Well, I found carpenter's tools, I found pencil notes, I found glasses and beer mugs and all sorts of things.
Any money in there?
No, I can't remember. It's not money, no. But they were good old pieces. Then we moved on to early bungalows, if you like, transitional villas, I think they call them.
Yeah, yep.
And they were sort of half-high, modernish and villa-ish at the same time. And they also had the same problems that villas had and the same advantages. They didn't leak either.
Yep.
They was tin roof, weatherboard, on concrete blocks, typical. No leaks in those. And then we moved on to early bungalows, which were often called California bungalows, which are low roof pitched. And they were sort of almost modern. I know we lived in one.
Good-looking homes.
They were good-looking, if you like. They weren't usually very big. And then we moved on to more modern homes after that, which is houses don't really age, do they? They can be 100 years old. And
it's sort of, I wouldn't say it lost its way, but it was quite clear villas and then bungalows, and then after that you've got this whole mix coming through, haven't you?
Well, there was a drive, of course, to make things cheaper. And by making things cheaper, you lost some of the soul of old properties, and people try to find shortcuts. And you had lower ceilings, and you had lower doors, and you had smaller footprint and smaller gardens, and everything was done to make things cheaper. And you can see it.
And then state homes. What about state homes, Ollie? You'd be doing your own thing, and then were state homes being done at the same time?
State homes, if you can get one, were one of the best because they were. I'm talking about the old state homes, not the current ones. The old state homes were beautifully built. They weren't pretty, they were pretty boxy, but they were beautifully built and solid as rocks, and the demand for them was very high. And if you could get your hands on one and do it up, it was money in the bank, but they're very hard to get.
So then, did you have a preference in the early days? Did you stick with villas and then go, okay, now I'm going to move on to bungalows, or did you sort of do bungalows and villas at the same time?
It didn't work like that. I just had to go wherever the bargain was.
Yeah, okay.
You just take it whether it was modern or old, and as they turned up, I couldn't have a preference really.
Okay, so when the opportunity came up, you went, okay, look, I know what to do on a villa and I know what to do on a bungalow.
A different type of work had to be done on each. Touch on the scrim thing, which are squeaky boards, talcum powder on the boards to stop them squeaking. Painting wooden blocks grey so they look like concrete blocks, all those sort of naughty things. I didn't really do that, but there was talk about that. Jacking houses up that had fallen off the blocks. Did that, and it's crawling under houses with a jack. You try that sometime. If the house came down on you, you would be flatter than a piece of paper. It didn't happen, obviously.
So a bit of fun there, and then I guess in the 80s, did it open you? What did you think when you saw these Mediterranean-style homes popping up?
Well, the moment they started popping up, these clad homes, everybody in the business, such as me, knew this was going to be a problem because we used to build with an old, I think we touched on it last time, old stuff called fibrillite, which cracked, let the water in. And we thought this is going to happen again. And so also they were built on concrete pads with no flexibility at all. So the first truck that rumbled by, or the first bit of wind that blew, they were going to crack. We knew it. But of course, it was cheap, and they did crack.
How did New Zealand get the perfect storm of allowing that style to happen and signing off on it?
It was cheap.
Yeah,
it was a cheap way to do it. And timber was expensive and cladding wasn't. And it was just a fad, a very expensive fad. It ruined many people financially. And it's a great shame and a scandal. And, of course, nobody's to blame, but everybody's to blame.
Because they look great at the start, didn't they? I remember having a cottage up in Titirangi, and friends had a monolithic, and I thought, why am I in this old cottage, wooden windows? And these guys got this flash-looking Mediterranean thing, which about a year later was like a sieve.
Well, that's the point. Everything new looks good. New cars look good. Everything brand new looks good until you use it a bit, and then the wheels fall off, literally.
Well, how about this? Let's go a little bit deeper in the monolithics, because we sell a lot, and I think there's a place for them in the market. Through your time in the market, did you pick up monolithics? Did you dodge monolithics? What's your thoughts?
I dodged monolithics.
Okay.
But I helped some people who were stuck in houses like that. In one case, I helped a guy reclad the house. It was a monumental task, because when you take the cladding off, you don't know what's behind and whether the framework...
It's a challenge, isn't it?
If the framework behind has also been affected, then you've got a problem. But I helped this guy reclad the place, and he sold it for a loss, but a less loss than he would have had otherwise.
Yep. Because mitigated the loss.
Yeah. Yep. But there's a good business out there for people who to buy monolithic homes, clad homes, if they buy them much more cheaply than they might be if they were something else, and are prepared to reclad them. But bear in mind that not all clad houses leak. Not all of them do. Some of them were made properly, and you can live them quite comfortably until you get around to recladding them, if ever. Some of them are quite good, but unfortunately a large majority of them do leak one way or the other.
Just the element of risk, isn't it? And you don't know until you start taking the cladding off whether the timber's dry or you've got black timber.
But remember, when you're buying a monoclad house, you're buying the land as well. That's the part that matters. It's the land that goes up in value.
Yep.
The house is just an improvement that comes and goes. You can do something to the house. You can't do much to the land. So there's good business for people if they can brace themselves taking on a monoclad house and living in it if it's comfortable and getting around to recladding it. Sometimes it'll be cheaper to start with.
Yeah, and I've seen that. I've seen that in the local market here. People have picked it up. They're at a price point that people can afford. It gives them the size of home. A couple of years later, they reclad. If there's nothing behind the walls that scares them, they've done well out of it. And in fact, I've seen one only a few blocks from here, which was sitting on the market, wasn't moving. The owner reclad it. I thought, oh, that's a big gamble, I think, on that one, and the gamble paid off.
Well, if you're thinking of getting a recladded house, buying it, then you can get people around to test the place. They do thermo imaging, and they can see where if there are any damp areas in it.
Yep.
And in fact, you can get handheld. It'll damp things. I've got one of those with sharp spikes in it that cut your hand up very quickly, and you can test. Some of the places I've looked at, there's little holes all over the place where I put this little gadget in quietly so nobody sees, little pinholes, little bore holes, just to test how much moisture is in the walls, you see. Just quietly. And then you see the thing go off the gauge. When you see the gauge goes up to 100% or something, you quietly tiptoe out of the place.
There'll be agents out there now wondering about Olly's non-intrusive inspection of the home. With little dimples left everywhere.
I'm very careful, very careful. Put them in places you didn't see. Just join them up with the other borer holes.
You made a point about the land underneath.
Yeah.
Why don't we touch on that? Freehold is easy. Then we've got Cross-Lease. Then we've got Leasehold. That'll be interesting.
Those three things. Now let's start. Many people use the word freehold, meaning they've paid the place off, which is wrong.
Good point.
When you've paid a place off, it's unencumbered. A big word, but never mind.
Yep.
But freehold does not mean paid off. Freehold means it's free of having to pay a lord or a baron 1,000 years ago. So that's what it means. And so freehold becomes an ownership paper eventually of the property. Keep it simple. Right? Leasehold is where the land that you're sitting your house on belongs to somebody else or some institution, and you're paying rent, ground rent it's called. And leases come up in various forms. Some of them are known as Glasgow leases. They go for 21 years at a time, go forever, but the rent is reviewed every 21 years, and others are reviewed every 7 years, other times. And there's always a shocker. Cornwall Trust has been in the paper recently for driving people off the land. Claimed, nobody knows really, because the ground rents have gone up from 5,000 a year to 50,000 a year or something. So I would advise people not to go onto leasehold land unless they are prepared for a big shock later on. But if you get, people do.
Sort of that midpoint, if we're talking leasehold, true leasehold, the midpoint, it looks quite attractive. You go, it's not that bad.
No.
Then as it runs down towards the end of the term, you go, actually, it's now looking cheaper. But you know that increase is coming. And that's where we normally see people trying to get on the market, and then the next buyer's going, hey, look, I know I'm going to take a caning. So they are difficult. But, there's a place there, isn't there?
Yeah, well, people can buy really nice houses on leasehold land for just peanuts because they have to pay a big chunk of money. There's also a lot of commercial property on leasehold. And that's a bit different. That's a bit different because in that case you do your sums and the tenant pays the ground rent, and that is built into the rent if they can afford it. But you don't hear much about commercial property. But there's quite a lot of commercial property around the city on leasehold land, and it doesn't cause it such a big problem.
Yeah, there's some in the bays actually. Yep. So okay, did you buy any? There we go. Leasehold. Okay.
My first commercial property in the 1960s, I made every mistake in the book. Well, that's the way you do it. There was no book to read about it.
You hadn't written the book.
No, I hadn't written the book, but that's how I learned how to write. I bought an empty, outdated commercial property on leasehold land in the city. I mean, I got everything wrong. I admit it. That was a baptism of fire, I tell you. But I managed to fill it up, and I managed to sell it in the end, but not at a loss, but I broke even, I think. It'll be years of strife. I got a very nice restaurant to go into it, which helped, and I rented the upper floors to various tenants. It took me about 5 years to dig myself out of that, and I won't make that mistake again. But the building was on Rutland Street in the city, next to the library. And I think the building's been swallowed up, I don't know. But I avoid the area because every time I go near it, I start to shake. Nightmare. But it was a good learning curve, and you got to learn.
As you've just reminded me, I'd forgotten this. I bought a leasehold property in Greenland, actually.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand the title, didn't have a clue. Recently out of the army. In fact, the real estate agent was an ex-army mate. Hopefully he didn't have a clue either. So we ended up with this thing, and then when we went to we did it up, went to resell it. People were sort of holding off because of leasehold. I was like, what the hell is leasehold?
Well, of course, leasehold was a good idea a couple of hundred years ago because people couldn't afford the land, so the barons and the lords let them pay ground rent, and there was no suggestion of the rent going up any particular high point. But it's all turned to custard with land prices over time going through the roof. And so leaseholders, it may be good for the owner of the land to collect the rent if he can collect it, but there's no point having empty properties trying to collect
which is a Greenland example. Previously we would see the newspaper with people saying, hey, look, I'll just hand the keys back, I'm out of here.
But you can freehold. It does.
It's a good point.
Some of the leaseholders, people who own the lease, will offer the land to the occupier. So if you've got a leasehold property, go to the person, company, institution, and say, look, how much to buy it? I went through that a couple of times and managed to buy the freehold at a reasonable price.
Yep.
And, that works. Sometimes.
And we've seen that. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so we've touched on freehold. No lord, no baron.
Yeah.
You're the boss. You're the king.
Yeah.
We've touched on leasehold.
Yep.
In the middle is cross-lease, and a lot of people, I know a lot of buyers get confused. They look at cross-lease and go, hey, we're not touching that.
That's right.
So your thoughts on the difference there?
Well, cross-lease has nothing to do with leasehold, as we just talked. Cross-lease was an old system, keep it simple, was an older system done it 60, 70 years ago, where you could take a larger piece of land and divide it up into smaller sections by leasing off little pieces, and usually leased off for 999 years.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
if you can survive that long, good luck to you. And so when you buy a cross-lease section, it's a bit of a joke to see that it's been cross-leased for 17 years, you've got 980-something years to go. No worries. The banks aren't quite so keen to lend on cross-lease. It's not too bad. Maybe they give 65% instead of 70%. But it's I don't think you can do it anymore now. But it still exists quite a lot around the country.
You made the point about leasehold. You can go to the parties there and say, okay, can we freehold it? And cross-lease, we can do the same, can't we?
You've got to get permission of all the other people on the site.
Yeah.
If there's 20 people on your piece of cross-lease, you might have a trouble with one or two of them who hang out for something. But I managed once to get 12 people to agree to freehold.
Yeah, okay.
Cross-lease.
Which is hard because you're trying to get the other parties at the same point in time with the same amount of finance to commit to it. Yeah,
it's not easy, but if it's only one or two or three, you can get away with it. But it's just something to be aware of. Anyway, the point is cross-lease has nothing to do with leasehold. Once you've bought a cross-lease site, paid for it, there's no more payments to made.
Yeah, that's it. You own it. Some, obviously, less rights than on the freehold. You've got a bit of some obligations to the other people on the cross-lease. Yeah, you can't do certain things depending how it's all written up, but that protects you. I've always looked at that and said you got more protection on the cross-lease than from the freehold neighbour next door. They could go crazy.
Yeah. Happen. I've seen some examples. Never mind.
Shall we leave unit titles to another day?
Yeah, it's
cool. I think so too.
And strata titles.
And strata titles. Yeah, let's
company titles. We've done all that.
Oh, company titles.
Yeah.
Again, Mission Bay is a company title one down there. That makes everybody's eyes sort of go in different directions.
Yeah.
We said. A week's a long time in politics.
Say that again. Say that again, brother.
So, a change? Labor's had a change. What's your thoughts?
Well, I don't know what I'm allowed to say. I'm not allowed to say. But anyway, the last Prime Minister has left for whatever reason. And after a week or two or three, the fairy dust will settle and reality will set in. And it's the same old government and the same old problems. And only today I read about and heard about overcrowding in motels. Some poor kids have been there for 100 days, 200 days, which is unbelievable. These problems will continue, whoever the Prime Minister is. And it's been mishandled badly, and you have to ask, why is this happening? Why can't people find a home to rent or something like that? Well, one of the reasons is that the present regime has poured scorn and difficulties on private rental owners. It's such a hard game. And
good point.
A part of the problem could be solved if there was encouragement for private rentals. I know that's an anthem to some people, but I think monuments should be put up to private investors. Candles should be lit every week. And knighthood should be dished out to private investors. And it's just the opposite, you see. And if we had more private rentals professionally done, it would be a step towards the right direction. But it's now gone the opposite way.
So that housing stock that was provided by the private person, they got a caning for it, hit with a pretty big stick, real big stick. And they went, I'll tell you what, I won't play the game. They got out of it. And now we've got families in motels for hundreds of days in towns where now, as a tourist, when you want to go to a New Zealand town, you think, well, I don't know if I certainly won't be in a motel in that town.
That's for sure.
You've got no idea what's happening in that motel or the one next door to it.
Well, my wife and I went for a drive through the country a while back, and we didn't stay in any motels for that reason, just in case. Why would you?
Yeah.
And so the motel industry in certain parts of the country has been, although they're making money, has actually been destroyed for the moment. Big problem. And it's a big problem, but nothing seems to be done. It's getting worse. And caning, in your words, caning the private sector for providing private accommodation is not the answer. But this is the result. There are consequences. Every action has a reaction. And there we are.
And I guess they'll paint it a little bit differently. See if people forget that, ignore that. We're pretty superficial when it comes to politics and politicians in New Zealand. If the same regime, as you say, can get away with it and continue.
It is a problem around the world a bit, but I think it's particularly bad here, and it shouldn't be for a country of our size. Our country is the same size as Japan, it's same size as many other big countries that have populations of 50 million. We've got 5 million. We should have plenty of land and plenty of resources to house everybody.
Which we have, haven't we? Yeah.
Why is this happening?
Yeah.
Well, we could spend the rest of the day discussing this one.
Well, you'd be the same as me. Anytime you take a flight out of Auckland, domestic flight, it's green. The whole country's green. There's no shortage.
No shortage.
Endless supply of land.
Endless supply.
Yep.
And coastline. Yep. Endless supply, and it's everything is low and flat. So
it's true. And easy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's easy. Yeah. So there's an answer there
Except
somewhere.
for Wellington.
Oh, we don't. People leave Wellington. People don't go to Wellington. They leave Wellington.
Our Wellington audience just clicked off. We lost 3 people.
No. I was born and I lived my first 13 years in Wellington. So fond memories. That's right. Sport by the politicians.
All right. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thanks. Really enjoyed it. We'll see the lay of the land, I guess, for New Zealand in 2 weeks.
Watch the space.
Yeah, watch the space. Excellent. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, guys. And we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with Olly. Thank you.